My next guest, as I just mentioned, is Geoffrey Starks, a commissioner at the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC. One of Commissioner Starks' main areas of focus is combating internet inequality, a topic we're deeply interested in covering. I was born in Kansas. I think he's from Kansas. That's what I'm just reading. So, Commissioner Starks, great to see you. What's your Kansas story first? Let me find out if it's real. Kick the tires here.
It is really real. Great to be with you, Steve. Yes, I am from Kansas and love. I'm a huge fan of Kansas. I encourage everyone to get back there from Kansas City. Enjoy the barbecue. Enjoy the Royals, the Chiefs, of course. So I am a Kansas Cityan and a Kansan at heart.
Well, Mr. Commissioner, Geoffrey, I have been reading about your work on your concerns about internet inequality out there, and that's really is the big topic that we're talking about today. So let me just package, if you were to kind of imagine what a young American or any American social contract with digital connectivity should be, what should that look like, and what is our deficit in delivering on it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve. I think the headline here, of course, is that the digital divide has morphed. It has calcified and hardened. During the pandemic, we've never seen a bigger gulf, frankly, separating those who have broadband, those who don't. Connectivity is powering our economy. It's educating students. It's driving telehealth, telemedicine, and not to mention, of course, keeping families together and businesses and conversations like this. And so, for the FCC's part, part of the contract that you're talking about here, for those who are aware, we have about $10 billion that we use programmatically and have for decades now. But just in the last 3 or 4 months, since the start of the year, we have launched over $10 billion in new programs just to help reach the unconnected. And so, part of what you're talking about here, Steve, I think has to be focusing on affordability. The fact of the matter is that there really, if you unpack it, like you said, there are 3 challenges to simplify and oversimplify. The first is the Kansas problem, rural areas. We need to build out everywhere. That's got to be part of the contract to make sure every American, even in those rural areas, that we reach the internet to you. Of course, then you have seniors as well. And in particular, digital literacy is something that we have seen as a problem. Folks who aren't aware of how to get online, don't have devices in a lot of ways. We've seen this also change during the pandemic because telehealth, telemedicine has been such a huge part, in particular for seniors, and keeping them healthy. And so we have started to see some of the seniors get digitally literate. But the last thing that I'll really focus on here that has to be part of the social contract that you're talking about is the issue of affordability. Tens of millions of American households lack that home broadband connection simply because they can't afford it. And so, I've long said you shouldn't have to choose between connectivity and keeping your lights on. But we know that millions of families do. Data's been released that about 4 in 10 adults, in particular those with low incomes, don't have home broadband. And in particular as well, Black and brown households disproportionately are disconnected. And so we do need long-term solutions here that are part of getting every American connected.
I don't mean to be silly about this because I know the complexity of America is staggering. You go to Appalachia and you look at some parts of regions, or you look at Kansas and you look at the unevenness in population. But I got to tell you, I've been to South Korea, I've been to Australia, where they essentially have universal broadband connectivity. You've seen the massive investments that a country with far fewer resources like India has made. And I guess it just begs the question of how can we be better at this? Now, I know, I talked to the CEO of AT&T the other day, John Stankey, and he said that one of our real limitations, which we seem to have overcome, we didn't even have a map of where we weren't connected. So the geo-mapping hadn't been done, and that sort of seems to have now been moving forward, that we now can have a map of what's not connected. But I guess to put some pressure on you, what are the, I've been asking who are the villains in the story, but I'll drop that. Nobody likes that question. Like who is the, what's getting in the way? And can we now, with resolve, after having gone through this terrible pandemic and seeing how important this is there now sufficient will and energy to finally deal with this?
It's a great question. I think there is, for sure, mapping is a process problem that admittedly we've had, and we need to move quickly. We need to continue to accelerate with the mapping. That's a bipartisan issue. It's been a long concern for me. We are dedicating billions and billions of dollars with a capital B to making sure we need to get to the right areas. And so it's been something that I have, in particular with the 5G mobility fund that the FCC, I think we have to know where the accurate mapping has to precede us deploying money. And getting those maps in place is a big job, and we're working through that right now. But, to answer the other part of your question here, I think, again, when you look at who is disconnected, and you look at a program that we just set forth, a $3.2 billion emergency broadband benefit that Congress assigned to us at the FCC, we really are helping those struggling households through the pandemic. And so when you look at who qualifies for the emergency benefit here, it's those that are on unemployment assistance. It's those that are qualified if you have young learners who are on breakfast or lunch program for learners. We also are drawing on programs like SNAP and HUD, as well as older university learners through Pell Grants. We are making sure that if you are otherwise having a low-income household or are low income, that is not a challenge to getting you connected. And so part of it is going to be, you see this on the Hill, obviously broadband is universally recognized as something that is part of the ongoing infrastructure talks. I think that's exactly right. Broadband is an essential component of our future and our shared future. And so I do think we're going to get there. The president has already recognized broadband as well as an essential part of how we're going to connect households and connect families. And so I do think there's the will, and we're going to get there.
I can feel your enthusiasm for all of this, and I like your framing that digital divide has become calcified and we need to decalcify it. We need to kind of wipe that out. We've got a question from our audience for you from Ilsa. Ilsa?
Hi, my name is Ilsa Hine. I'm an intern with the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. And my question is, what are the most significant barriers preventing the expansion of connectivity in the U.S.?
I could have started with that question.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, thank you. I'm always happy to have and talk to those future generations that are going to continue to help us solve these complex problems. I think the main challenge is, as I kind of laid out, there's a rural issue and making sure that we reach the internet out to and get the last mile connectivity to all those houses. Obviously, you hear a lot of talk on whether it's going to be a fixed connection or a wireless connection. Making sure 5G continues to build out is something that I have my eye on. And that's something that simply cannot be just in densely urban populated areas. We need to make sure that 5G becomes ubiquitous for all Americans. The other aspect of this is there truly are a lot of folks that live in cities that remain disconnected. And so that gets to some of the issues that I was talking about with affordability. And then the issues of making sure that we get devices into the hands of folks, because even if you have connectivity, if you don't have a computer, and we've seen this obviously with our young learners that over the last year had to rely on virtual learning. We had, some students learning on cell phones. And we needed to get them tablets. We needed to get them computers. And so there's a myriad of problems here that we're all focused on and making sure that this coming school year, we have a $7 billion emergency connectivity fund. The last thing that I'll say that's a piece of this, the emergency broadband benefit which is paying for low-income folks to get connected, and the Emergency Connectivity Fund, helping our schools and helping our libraries. These are temporary programs right now that are set to expire basically when the money runs out. And so we do need to start to have long-term solutions here.
Geoffrey, I got to ask you one last question. You're talking about 5G, our sponsor at NCTA, so I get into 10G networks, 10 gigabit networks. But we also know part of the story in America right now is the fragility and security of those networks. I mean, what's your gut feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? How secure are our networks? What do we need to do? You've been very involved with national security implications of this. How bad is our situation today? And in your gut, are we able to fix it?
Yeah, it's you know, in early of 2019, I shed light and really highlighted this issue with a workshop. I wrote a report called "Find It, Fix It, Fund It," in which we needed to understand the scope of insecure equipment, Huawei and ZTE, a lot of Chinese insecure equipment in our networks, and making sure that we rip and replace that insecure equipment. The good news is that help is on the way. Just yesterday, the FCC marked a significant milestone in my mind in eliminating that untrustworthy equipment from our communication networks. We established a framework for reimbursing carriers that do have insecure equipment in their networks. Nearly almost $2 billion for us to focus on this issue. But the fact of the matter is, Steve, is that network security is national security. And so it's an imperative that we get this right and make sure that Americans are protected.
Well, Geoffrey Starks from Kansas, Commissioner, Federal Communications Commission, really appreciate your candor and your good work on this, on all of these issues. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Great. Glad to be with you, Steve. Be well.